Well, welcome, friends. Thanks for joining us again for the Leadership Link podcast. Today, we have a treat. We certainly do. Proverbs 22:1 says that a good name is better than great riches. And our guest today has had an amazing career and has, I've never heard anything negative said about him. You have an impeccable good name, Dr. Money. And so our guest is Dr. Royce Money. He was a faculty member here at ACU, a president for almost 20 years, been a chancellor for the past 10 years, and has served in ministry and done so many great things for the ACU community and the church community. And so we're thankful to have you here with us today.
Pleasure.
Today we're talking about the question, how does a Christian manage people? And specifically, how do you manage people when you might have to make difficult decisions about their employment? And so I kind of wanted to start with just having you tell our listeners, what's your leadership experience been like? What's kind of been the scope of it?
Well, looking back, I found myself drawn even as a teenager into student government things in high school. And my senior year, Dr. Gary McCaleb was president of the Student Association. I was vice president. And so I had that type of experience. But then going into pulpit ministry after 3 years of grad school, again, kind of thrust me into a leadership role, even though I was starting with fairly small churches. And my first church, I didn't even have a staff. And so I was it. And whatever I could get from Pam on a volunteer basis. So after I went back for my PhD, I began to really have a desire to get a little bit deeper into administrative things. And even though I was still preaching for a congregation, I found myself enjoying administrative tasks. And so I had a reasonable degree of success with it. And so I was not aware of all of this going on really in my life. And then I had an opportunity in Springfield, Missouri to teach at Missouri State University on a part-time basis while I was working with a church. That really awakened me to higher ed. I love teaching. And so that in turn led me to ACU. And I taught for about 6 or 8 years, then became provost for 3 years and then president for 19. The provost thing was the hardest.
Oh, really?
Because I was caught between the president and the faculty. But that kind of evolved. And along the way, you get affirmation. A very wise man told me one time, there's some things that you kind of look at. Do you enjoy doing this sort of thing? Do people tell you that you're good at it? This type of thing. And then the third one is, do you have the opportunity? That's where the Lord comes in. And in my case, I was probably 35 before I began to get a clear picture of what I really lacked. And so my advice to younger people is don't rush that calling.
Yeah.
It may come instantly, may come at a young age, it may not.
I love that because I think I hear more and more students wrestling with calling, specifically as they near their senior year. They feel like it's supposed to all be planned out.
Right.
And in your case, and many others that I've heard, that's not always how God works. He's navigating our careers and bringing us to the places He needs us most.
Yeah, God's will is best seen in retrospect. And so I can look back and say, oh, I see why it took so long. I needed to learn this, and you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, it makes sense. But when you're in the moment, you just can't do that.
That's a good way of looking at it. So I'm assuming as a provost, now a lot of our listeners may not know exactly what a provost does.
It's the chief academic officer of the university, and that's where I really got deeply into personnel issues. And I must confess up front, Dennis, that is the part of leadership I enjoyed the least. I probably should confess that.
That's fair.
And that is dealing with people who either are underperforming or whose personal lives are in trouble or just not a good fit, all of these kind of categories. That's the human relationship element is the hardest element I found in leadership.
And that's kind of where we're headed today. I kind of want to lead it with this way of thinking about business that I've heard some people say in Christian atmospheres, is that, well, when you're in business, you kind of have to do business stuff. And Christianity's reserved for when you leave business, and then you can kind of do your charitable things. And the way you treat people really matters. But business is business. Come on, right? And so what do you think about that way of thinking?
My experience has been people who live on that dual track, which is kind of a schizophrenic existence, if you want to put it that way, soon begin to develop some major issues in their life. I think to be a Christian means that you're a Christian, whatever you do. You're not. You don't have an 8 to 5 exemption Monday through Friday, and so the people who, in my opinion, do the best job are the ones who fully integrate their faith into their work. Now that takes a lot of different expressions, and I don't pretend to know all of the expressions it might take, but I do know that the dual existence thing doesn't work.
Okay. So what would you say then, what might be some differences we should expect to see between how a Christian leader or manager manages people as opposed to someone who doesn't follow Christ?
Well, let me start with the small things. I always made it a practice to get to know people. I even hate to think of it in hierarchical terms, but let me do that for the sake of argument. Who were on the bottom rungs of the ladder, so to speak? The maintenance workers, the people who clean the building, the food service people, and I tried as best I could to develop a cordial relationship with them, to inquire about their families, to show genuine interest, to go to the funeral of one of the chefs over here. She lost her husband, and she was very surprised to see me at the funeral. By the way, good place to insert this, for a leader, people really appreciate when you show up at marker events in their lives, and the death is certainly one. Yeah. And it can happen with celebratory events too, but sometimes you can't always go, but you can write a personal letter, and you can handwrite it instead of dictating it or typing it yourself or something of that sort. That's it's that personal message. I spent so much time when I was president handwriting thank you notes, even to the point to where some of the support staff said, "Are you sure you want to take this much on?" And I said, "Yes, I am sure." And probably got more comments from broad spectrum of people about that than almost anything else. And so whatever is that personal touch in your business or whatever business that would apply to. But that would be one that immediately comes to mind. Just basically the way you treat people. The second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say except when people work for you. It applies all the way across the board. It applies in my family. It applies in my workplace. And so a basic respect for people, I think, is pretty foundational.
Yeah. Personal notes, as you were saying that, I was remembering marketers are trying to get wise to the power of handwriting. Yeah. And so they have these printers that print handwritten script, and I'm always looking at it. And if I find one where I really think it's genuine, it changes the relationship completely. And
the other thing too, if you have one that's is kind of a form letter or something, if you, I can't sign all of them, but every once in a while I would just put 2 or 3 words great to hear from you, great to see you last week, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And those are the letters that I pay attention to.
So getting into kind of the more controversial subjects related to when you might have to fire someone, to think about Christianity and how we're called to be people of forgiveness and people who show grace and mercy like we've been shown it. Is there a time when perhaps we're going to have to end employment for somebody and have those difficult conversations?
There is, and that, as I mentioned before, is a very hard thing to do. At least it was hard for me. And one person one time said, well, you know, I didn't think a Christian organization would fire people. And I said, quite to the contrary, because we are a Christian organization, we expect more than an average university. And so the standard is higher, not lower or the same. So I would say there are two categories of termination, and they are handled differently. One would be a longer-term performance issue. On those, I learned, and I also, to the departmental heads, conveyed the idea that it's very important to have a conversation with the people during their annual evaluation in which you, in very plain language, say what you perceive the problem to be, and then you help them design a way to address the issue to get out of that problem. Now, some people would simply refuse to do that. I remember a sexual harassment situation in which the person never admitted that what he was doing was inappropriate, never admitted it. But when 15 or 20 females and males come to me and say that, then I need to act on that. And so it kind of depends. But if you can, if it's a faculty member, outline some type of rehabilitative track, get them with a more mature, experienced, effective faculty member. And so that way, when you do come to the parting, if there is a parting, you have evidence. We had this discussion with you this date, had a discussion with you the second time. Now, this is the third time, and we're just going to need to make a change. Maybe this is not a good track for you. Maybe this is not a good place for you. That's a little sub-issue. Sometimes people are misplaced, and if they were in a different situation, they would perform much better. So you have to figure that in. The other category are the ones where something has to be done on the spot, within a day or 2 days or a week. You don't have the luxury of saying, well, something has to be done. Most of the time, it involves inappropriate behavior. And in that case, the chief human relations officer and the chief legal counsel always were with me, or they may have done that on their own with my direction, because it does have HR implications and it does have legal implications, and you have witnesses. And so, that's hard. And it's even harder when they're your friends, when you have a long and nice relationship with them. But for the integrity of the organization, you can ill afford to just leave it alone, look the other way.
What I hear from you in that is that this is not something you look forward to or ever hope to really engage in, and you're trying to use procedural justice and give people a way to improve.
Right.
And when there's inappropriate behavior that's contrary to the expectations and codes of your institution.
It's the covenant or the agreement, the organizational agreement. Usually, in fact, I would strongly advocate that these be in writing, and that they be looked at by an HR person and by legal counsel. If you're not careful, I mean, if you're too slack in that, you open the organization up to lawsuits and this type of thing. Fortunately, I can't remember a single one that was not the conflicts in which I was engaged. It wasn't settled. Another thing that I would like to add, and here's maybe a Christian distinctive. I hope it goes beyond that. But there were several instances in which a person, let's just say male or female, could be faculty or staff position, was clearly guilty of some ethical, moral violation. It could be sexual nature, could be stealing money, it could be, you name it. It could be anger issues. On more than one occasion, we terminated someone, and then the university paid for counseling for 3 months or 6 months. And I'm glad to report to you that in most cases, redemption took place. And those were redemptive things, even to the point of having one or two come back and thank us for it. So that's, to me, that's a difference.
Yes.
My first boss was Garvin Beecham, who was would be the equivalent of VP for student life now. And I worked for him for 2 years, and on more than one occasion, I've seen him dismiss a guy from ACU, expelled him, and then said, I imagine you don't have a place to stay tonight, tomorrow night. Come over to my house, and you can stay with my family. I kick you out of school, but you can stay with us, or you can make some other arrangements. It's little things like that.
Yeah.
That on down the road, you hope will, when calmer days come along, somebody will say, well, that was a good thing to do. I deserve that, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of when Paul had his disagreement with Barnabas over John Mark, and then later on, don't we see that John Mark may have been actually helping take care of Paul in his old age? And so that's, I believe as Christians, that's our hope, right, is that people will develop and recover.
I had and I'll keep the identities out of here, but when I was a young, inexperienced green staffer here at ACU, I made a big mistake one time. I was supposed to provide transportation for one of the administrators, and I waited an extra hour, and the person didn't show up, so I decided to come home. I'd been married 2 weeks. Why not go home?
Yeah.
So the person got there about 5 minutes after I left, and this person could have ruined my career, literally ruined my career. But to his dying day, he'd never mentioned it to a single person. And wound up being one of my closest friends. And so, back to your original question, what's the Christian difference? It's stuff like that.
Yeah. So you said no questions were out of bounds.
Sure.
And so I've been thinking just in how we work as an organization as Christians. You apologized on behalf of ACU for previous kind of racial injustices, which is something that I know people have great respect for you, because that takes an incredible amount of courage. When we think about just managing diversity and what diversity can do for an organization, what are your thoughts about that? I've never gotten to hear, did you have people that were upset with you for doing that?
Well, the short version of how it came about, we had a benefactor provide for about 25 or 30 people to come, about 50% black leaders in Churches of Christ, and about 50% either preachers, white preachers, or faculty members at ACU. We met on a Thursday night. That was an open session. By the way, we attracted national press. I didn't intend to, but we did. And I said, you can cover the Thursday night lectures, but you cannot be in the Friday one. We closed the door, went over to Hillcrest Church. And I said, why don't we, on the whiteboard here, let's just list all the problems, kind of a free association, and then we'll spend the afternoon talking about solutions. And I thought it was important to get to air the issues and then work on the solutions. We came to the end of the day, and it was obvious that a lot of changes need to be made. And I said, after one of our lengthy prayer sessions, what do we need to do next? I don't know what to do next. Long silence, and one of the black preachers said, well, I think you could start with an apology. And ACU did not admit blacks until 1962, 1963. And there's some terrible stories that come out of those times. And so the apology was at Southwestern Christian College, which was in Terrell. And the chair of the board was in that meeting, and I said, well, I'll have to talk to my board about this, but I'm sure that will be no problem. And sure enough, it would get a quick, unanimous vote that was a great idea. So I went over there. It was just 2 paragraphs long, but I did not know how I would be received. Whatever, was received very warmly, and then made the same apology at what used to be the old ACU lectureships back in, that would be February of 2000. So it was here at Moody Coliseum. So that maybe got some things started. There were some reconciliation meetings that came out of that, and since that time it's not always been consistent. These movements are hard to keep going consistently, and you can tell from just watching the news on any given day that we don't have things figured out in the U.S. by a long shot when it comes to racial equity. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that that action that you're talking about came out of listening rather than my deciding what to do next, to ask and then to follow through. So that was the context. We had some meetings, reconciliation meetings after that. We ran into some rocky road, which you inevitably will do. Mm-hmm. And there was an interim where we had to stop for a while, but now we received in the meantime a very generous gift from one of our donors to advance multiracial issues involving faculty, staff, and students. And it was a considerable amount of money. And the man said, I don't want this put in an endowment. I want it all spent within 5 years. And so we were able to jumpstart. And at that time, we were running about 6% students of color. And today, this year, it's in the high 30s, maybe 40%. And so those things take time. There are still glaring areas to be left, and Dr. Schubert would be the first to tell you that. But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for your courage to do that, and I think of leaders as role modeling behaviors for their organizations, and in many ways that role modeling was set by that statement and many others that you made. So I wanted to close with kind of your advice for students. Many of our listeners are business students who are trying to navigate, okay, I want to be a Christ follower and I want to be on mission, but I also might be working for, PwC or Ernst & Young and a secular company. And how do I do that? How should they go about living out their mission for Christ in the workplace?
Well, I think one of the things to remember is you have to work out your own journey and not assume that your journey and your decisions will fit everybody. And so I'm sure, and I'm safe in saying this to every individual, you have enough to work on with your own life. I have enough to work on with my own life and not have to take on somebody else. And so I may make choices in my profession if it has to do with conduct in the office or out of the office or whatever. But I want to be careful and not put everybody to the same standard that I have. So there's an individual element about this. I think it's really important. And I've had friends who backed out of professions because it just got too burdensome for them to handle the pressures, the secular pressures that you're talking about. I have other friends who are just drawn to those kind of secular contexts because that's where they want to be, the tip of the spear. And God gives certain gifts, some to stay, some not to leave, And so that's why it's hard to make a universal conclusion about this because it's so highly individual. I have talked to mentors along the way. I've had different mentors at different stages along the way, and they've given me really solid advice when I can't see the way clear. And so don't hesitate to ask some people that you respect, and chances are you'll wind up in a good spot. May not be tomorrow, next week, or next year, but if you're searching, I think you'll find it.
Well, that's well said. I think so. We have some insider information, and we brought you a little gift that we heard got you through your presidency. Do we have it in the studio here? Hold on just a moment.
But I know what it is.
We're doing all kinds of unscripted stuff today. But we're so thankful to have you here. Here it comes.
Yep,
all right, we'll see how this comes through in video.
Yes.
Peanut butter M&Ms?
Yes. Anything with peanuts or peanut butter.
Okay.
My staff I would keep these things in a crystal bowl in my office. And the staff would measure, I found this out later, measure my moods and the amount of pressure I was under by how many of these I would eat. And I heard one staffer say one time, well, he's up to 40 and it's not even noon yet, Bad day.
Yeah.
So anyhow, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're close to my heart.
Okay. Well, friends, I hope that you enjoyed the discussion today. I'm so thankful, Dr. Money, for your legacy here and your continued leadership. For you and Pam and the legacy you've left, we're thankful. And we have much to discuss about how Christians should be managing people and kind of what our standards like. And so I hope this conversation is meaningful. God bless you guys.